One question. When you ask your students, what do you think? More often than not, you will find that your students really struggle to answer this question. And usually you will be met with a blank stare or a one-word answer. We educators talk a lot about developing critical thinking skills in our classrooms. But here's the challenge. Have we actually taught our students how to think critically, step by step? In this Me moment, we'll explore what critical thinking means within the IB framework, and more importantly, how to bring it to life in our classrooms across subject areas and across different stages. Research shows us that explicitly teaching critical thinking leads to greater student engagement, deeper understanding, and more independent learning. But it's not automatic. Critical thinking needs to be taught, it needs to be modeled, and it needs to be practiced intentionally across all subjects and across all programs. In the IB, critical thinking sits within the broader category of thinking skills. And as we've seen in other videos, thinking skills is one of the ATLs, or approaches to learning. Critical thinking, according to the IB, includes 7 sub-skills. So let's explore each of these with examples across subject areas. So the first skill that is going to help us develop critical thinking skills is the ability to analyze complex concepts and issues. So the aim is to help students break down ideas, identify relationships, and find patterns. So here are some strategies. So for instance, for PYP science, you could use a graphic organizer or poster to unpack the water cycle and ask students what are the parts and how are they connected. In NYP Individuals and Societies, you could ask students to create a concept map to represent the causes and consequences of the Industrial Revolution. In DP Biology, you could examine a case study on antibiotic resistance and ask students to identify causal relationships in bacterial evolution. You might also want to use Socratic seminars or structured discussions to go deeper into complex ideas. A second and crucial skill is the ability to recognize unstated assumptions and bias. So here we want the students to identify what's being said and also what's being left unsaid. The aim is to build awareness of implicit perspectives in texts and in media. So for instance, in PYP language, you could explore a storybook and ask whose voice is missing. In NYP media studies, you could analyze adverts for gender or cultural bias. In DP history, you could compare textbook accounts of the same historical events from different countries and different perspectives. So teaching students to spot bias and question assumptions is really powerful, and it also nurtures agency. A third skill is to be able to evaluate evidence and arguments. And this is where students learn to weigh different perspectives and justify their own. So for instance, at PYP level, you could compare 2 sources about healthy eating, for instance, and you can ask your students to tell you which one they think is more trustworthy and why. In NYP English Language and Literature, you could use peel paragraphing to critique a character's argument in a novel and ask your students to really justify their views. In DP Economics, you could use a debate to establish the merits of free trade using evidence from different economic models. As you can see with these tasks, you are not just building arguments, you are building discernment. Your students are developing their own opinions, balanced, informed opinions based on evidence. The next skill is the ability to draw conclusions and generalizations. So the aim is to help students move from facts to insights and to encourage logical inferences and synthesis of ideas. So let's see how to do this. In PYP mathematics, for instance, we can ask students to predict the outcome of a pattern sequence and to also explain the rule. In NYP sciences, After conducting a lab, you can ask students to write a conclusion that links the evidence they found to the initial hypothesis. In DP psychology, you can ask students to synthesize findings from multiple studies to conclude the impact of environment on behavior, for instance. So you can see how these tasks, what they are about, is about moving beyond the recall of information to reasoned thinking. Another skill is the ability to test generalizations and conclusions. And this aims to encourage students to challenge their own assumptions and to really test their thinking. It aims to promote critical inquiry and intellectual humility as well. So for instance, for PYP social studies, you can use scenarios to test generalizations. For instance, rules help keep people safe, or all communities need leaders. For NYP mathematics, you can explore exceptions to rules. For instance, multiplying always makes bigger, except in the case of multiplying by fractions. In DPTOK, you can use counterclaims to challenge generalizations in a knowledge question. For instance, science always leads to truth. You can really see how these questions, these tasks, push our students' thinking further by presenting counterexamples and really encouraging curiosity. Next is the ability to check understanding based on new information and evidence. And this is where learning becomes dynamic. The aim is to foster flexibility and a growth mindset. So here are some examples. So for PYP arts, after peer critique, you can ask students to revise a visual art piece and ask them to reflect on what changed. For NYP language acquisition, following a formative assessment, you can ask students to reflect in a learning journal about the aspects of grammar that have caused more difficulty in their learning, or any grammar rule that they've misunderstood. For DP biology, you can update a model of a biological process after learning about a recent discovery. So again, we are not just teaching facts, we are teaching intellectual flexibility. And finally, the ability to consider ideas from multiple perspectives. This skill is at the heart of international mindedness, and the aim is to build empathy, global awareness, and balanced thinking. So here are some suggestions. So for PYP, personal, social, and physical education, you could use role plays, for instance, to represent a class conflict from different students' perspectives. In NYP design, you can ask students to redesign a product for users in different cultural or geographical settings. In DP Global Politics, you could explore the refugee crisis from the viewpoints of multiple stakeholders, for instance, the host countries, the migrants, or the NGOs. All of these tasks really help students explore other perspectives, and this nurtures empathy, balance, and open-mindedness. So just one final thought, and especially for you, if you are new to the IB, just remember, teaching critical thinking doesn't mean doing more, it means teaching with more intention. And even a simple change just in how you ask a question, how you guide a discussion, which activities you select for your assessments can make a powerful difference. So don't wait until you've mastered it all. Start small and start with curiosity, yours and your students. Thanks for watching this Me Moment. Let's grow, teach, and inspire together.